Camille Harris was no stranger to long nights, endless flights, and hotel rooms that seemed to blur together after a while. The life of a CEO wasn't glamorous in the way people imagined. On the outside, she carried herself with poise, grace, and a confidence that came only from years of building something from nothing. But behind the press releases, interviews, and keynote speeches, there were grueling schedules, sleepless nights, and days when the only thing she craved was silence. At 42, Camille embodied resilience and ambition. She was the kind of woman who refused to accept no when the world told her she wasn't enough. The world had told her that many times when she was a little girl in Atlanta, growing up in a neighborhood where opportunity rarely knocked, when she was a college student trying to get loans approved, when she was a young professional navigating industries where women like her were underrepresented and undervalued. Yet each no had been fuel. Fuel for the long nights she spent sketching out business plans, fuel for the risks she took when no one else believed in her, fuel for the quiet but unshakable belief that she was destined for more. That belief had blossomed into Harris Lux Hospitality Group, a boutique hotel chain that had grown from a single modest property into a network of nearly 24 high-end establishments scattered across the country. Each hotel was more than a building, it was a testament to her vision, spaces where elegance met warmth, where every detail was designed to make people feel both pampered and welcomed. The Charleston property, the one she was now walking into, was the crown jewel of her expansion. On that chilly Friday evening, the city was alive with weekend travelers and the hum of nightlife just beginning to stir. The hotel lobby glowed like a sanctuary against the crisp air outside. Its marble floors shimmered beneath amber light fixtures, tall ceilings rose in grand fashion adorned with local artwork, and the faint scent of lavender and cedar hung in the air, a carefully chosen fragrance that Camille herself had approved months earlier. She knew every detail of this space because she had insisted on being involved in the design process. Nothing here was accidental. Yet she did not walk in as the celebrated CEO with a ribbon-cutting smile or a team trailing behind her. She walked in as Camille, the traveler, tired, hungry, and longing for a warm bath followed by the comfort of crisp sheets. She wore jeans, a navy blazer over a white blouse, and sneakers that had carried her through airports all week. Her hair was tied back in a simple bun, a practical style after 2 long days of travel. Her only luggage was a worn leather carry-on, scratched at the corners but sturdy, the kind of bag that had seen both economy cabins and first-class seats. She approached the front desk with the calm assurance of someone who belonged. Her smile was small but genuine. "Good evening," she said, resting her ID and credit card on the counter. "I'd like to check in." Harris reservation for Camille Harris. The man behind the desk glanced at her ID. He was young, mid-20s maybe, with neatly combed blonde hair and a navy suit that fit him like it was fresh from the dry cleaner. His smile was practiced, polite, but hollow in a way that felt rehearsed. He gave her ID only the quickest glance before sliding it back across the counter. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he said smoothly, his tone laced with an almost patronizing sweetness. "We don't seem to have a reservation under that name. Are you sure this is the right hotel?" Camille tilted her head slightly, suppressing the amused smirk tugging at her lips. Mistakes happened, even in luxury hotels. She knew that better than anyone. Still, there was something about his tone, the casual dismissal, that rubbed her the wrong way. "Positive," she said evenly. "Could you check again, please?" "Harris, Camille. It should be a suite under my company account." The clerk's fingers tapped across the keyboard in a flurry of motion, his eyes narrowing as though he were humoring her. After a few seconds, he let out a sigh that seemed more dramatic than necessary and shook his head. "No, nothing's coming up. And unfortunately, we're fully booked tonight." Something in the way he said it, brisk, final, and with a hint of satisfaction, made her pause. It wasn't the words themselves, but the delivery. It was as if he wanted her to leave quickly, as if her presence there was a nuisance. "That's interesting," Camille said, keeping her voice calm, though her eyes sharpened, "because I confirmed this reservation myself earlier today. Could you double-check with your manager?" For the first time, his polite facade cracked. The corners of his mouth twitched into something less like a smile and more like a smirk. He leaned closer, lowering his voice just slightly, but not enough that the guests nearby couldn't overhear. "Ma'am, perhaps you should try one of the budget hotels down the road," he said smoothly. "This property caters to a certain clientele." The implication landed like a slap across the face. For a long moment, Camille simply stared at him, her lips pressed into a thin line. The noise of the lobby dimmed. The clinking glasses from the lounge, the murmur of guests checking in, even the faint hum of the fountain by the entrance, all seemed to fade beneath the rush of her pulse. "A certain clientele," she repeated softly, her voice steady but laced with steel. "And what exactly do you mean by that?" He shifted uncomfortably, his polished confidence showing its first crack. "I just meant we host business professionals, corporate travelers, guests who expect a certain level of professionalism." Camille interjected sharply. "Courtesy? Respect." The young man stammered, caught in the quicksand of his own prejudice. His cheeks flushed, and he straightened, crossing his arms in a defensive gesture as though to shield himself. "I'm afraid I can't help you, ma'am. Perhaps if you booked through a different platform, but as I said, we're at capacity. You'll need to make other arrangements." Camille reached for her ID and credit card, sliding them slowly, deliberately back into her wallet. Her eyes never left his. Inside, a storm brewed, anger, hurt, disappointment, and a familiar ache she thought she had long since buried. She had faced moments like this before, boardrooms where her voice was ignored until a man repeated the same point, contracts where her authority was questioned even after she signed them, investors who doubted her leadership because of the color of her skin and the fact that she was a woman. But this was different. This wasn't about being doubted as a professional. This was about being dismissed as a human being in the very space she had built from the ground up. This wasn't a mistake, she thought, her face unreadable. This was a choice. Outwardly, however, she remained composed. Years of experience had taught her that dignity was its own weapon. "You're certain there are no rooms available?" she asked, her tone calm but cutting. "None at all." The clerk nodded, his smugness returning. "That's correct. We're full." Camille gave him a long, measured look, one that made him shift uncomfortably again, though he tried to maintain his veneer of authority. She slipped her bag strap onto her shoulder and stood tall, every inch of her presence radiating a quiet strength he couldn't possibly comprehend. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue. She didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her flustered. Instead, she turned and walked away, the sound of her heels clicking against the marble floor echoing through the lobby like a drumbeat. Each step was deliberate, steady, and purposeful. As she crossed the room, she pulled out her phone, her expression unreadable to those watching. But inside, she was already calculating. She wasn't just Camille, the traveler, anymore. She was Camille Harris, founder and CEO of the very empire this young man had dared to dismiss. And in those 5 quiet minutes, as the front desk clerk returned to his computer with a satisfied grin, Camille Harris prepared to teach him, and everyone else watching, a lesson they would never forget. Camille stepped into a quiet alcove near the hotel's lounge, the chatter of the lobby muffling behind the polished wooden divider. Her fingers moved with practiced precision as she pulled her phone from her bag and dialed a number she knew by heart. The call connected in seconds. "Anthony," she said when her regional operations director answered. Her tone was low, firm, and controlled, the voice of a leader who never wasted words. "I'm standing in the lobby of our Charleston hotel. Your front desk agent just denied me a room. He claims there are no reservations under my name and that the property is full. I want you here in the next 10 minutes. Bring the assistant manager, too." There was a sharp pause on the other end, followed by Anthony's steady reply, "On my way." Camille ended the call, slipped her phone back into her bag, and lifted her chin. She could feel eyes on her, the curious glances of other guests scattered through the lobby. Some looked sympathetic, others indifferent, but all of them had witnessed the exchange. She refused to let the weight of their silence weaken her resolve. Instead of retreating, Camille strolled slowly through the lobby, studying details she already knew well. The hand-picked artwork depicting Charleston's historic streets, the custom chandeliers designed by a black-owned lighting studio she discovered, the imported furniture sourced with care, everything in this space was hers. Every decision, every flourish bore her signature vision. Yet, in this moment, she stood there treated as though she were invisible. Worse, as though she didn't belong. She let her heels echo against the marble floor as she walked back toward the seating area, her posture tall, her expression unreadable. She knew what was coming. 5 minutes was all Anthony needed to arrive, and when he did, the tone of this lobby would shift like a storm front rolling in. True to her estimate, the glass doors swung open in less than 5. Anthony strode in, tall and broad-shouldered, his sharp navy suit making him look like a man perpetually ready for war on her behalf. Beside him hurried Clara, the assistant manager of the property, whose nervous eyes darted across the room the moment they spotted Camille. Both wore concern as clearly as if it had been printed across their foreheads. "Ms. Harris," Anthony called, his voice booming across the polished lobby. Heads turned instantly, guests pausing mid-conversation. "I came as quickly as I could. What seems to be the issue?" Before Camille could answer, the front desk clerk interjected. His tone carried the same smug dismissal as before, though now it wavered slightly, betraying a hint of unease. "Sir, I already explained. This guest doesn't have a reservation. We're fully booked tonight." Anthony froze, his brow furrowing as he turned toward Camille. The recognition hit him in an instant. His eyes widened, and his posture snapped straighter than a soldier at attention. "Do you have any idea who this is?" Anthony thundered, his voice cutting through the space like a gavel in a courtroom. "This is Camille Harris. She owns this hotel. She is the CEO of Harris Lux Hospitality Group." The entire lobby fell into stunned silence. Guests who had been pretending not to listen gasped openly. Murmurs spread like ripples across a pond as people whispered the words owner and CEO. Even the bartenders at the lounge stopped mid-pour to glance toward the commotion. The clerk's face drained of color, his posture sagging as if the weight of his mistake suddenly crushed him. His mouth opened slightly, but no words emerged. Camille stepped forward, each movement deliberate. She carried herself like royalty, though there was no arrogance in her stride. Only authority, dignity, and the quiet force of a woman who had fought too long to ever bow to disrespect. "You told me there was no reservation under my name," she began, her voice calm but cold. The quiet tone carried more weight than shouting ever could. "You told me there were no rooms available. And then you implied that I didn't belong here, that I should go somewhere else. Do you have any explanation for that?" The clerk's lips trembled, but no sound came out. His carefully polished demeanor had completely shattered, leaving only the raw panic of a man realizing he had misjudged his opponent. Clara, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment, scrambled to fill the silence. "Ms. Harris, I am so deeply sorry. There must have been a misunderstanding." "This wasn't a misunderstanding," Camille cut in sharply, her eyes never leaving the clerk. Her voice sliced through Clara's excuse like glass. "This was bias. This was disrespect. And it happened in the lobby of my hotel." The young man finally found his voice, stammering like a child caught in a lie. I didn't know. That's exactly the problem," Camille said, her tone firm but controlled. She leaned slightly forward, her gaze piercing. "You didn't care to know. You looked at me and decided I wasn't worthy of the same courtesy you would give someone else. You dismissed me without a second thought. And if you'll treat me that way, the owner of this company, how are you treating our other guests?" The silence that followed was deafening. Guests shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, their eyes darting between Camille and the trembling clerk. Anthony stood tall beside her, his jaw clenched in fury. Clara wrung her hands, visibly mortified, and the young man at the center of it all looked like he wished the polished marble beneath his feet would open up and swallow him whole. Camille let the weight of her words hang in the air, unhurried, giving everyone time to absorb them. She had no interest in theatrics. Her point was already made. Finally, she turned to Anthony, her tone decisive. "You know what needs to be done." Anthony nodded solemnly. "Yes, ma'am." He faced the clerk, his expression hard as steel. "Gather your things. You're done here." The young man's eyes widened in panic. "Wait, please, I didn't mean." His voice cracked as he reached for an excuse that wouldn't come. But Camille raised her hand, silencing him with a single gesture. "Your intentions don't matter. Your actions do. Consider this your lesson. I hope you carry it with you because in this industry or in life, there is no place for the smallness you showed tonight." Two members of hotel security appeared at Anthony's signal. They flanked the clerk, who sagged in defeat as they escorted him out of a lobby. Murmurs followed in their wake, whispers weaving through the crowd like a live current. Camille turned then, slowly sweeping her gaze across the remaining guests. When she spoke, her tone softened, but it carried the same unwavering authority. "To those of you who witnessed this," she said, her voice steady, "I want you to know that we are committed to being better. This hotel and every hotel in our group is meant to be a haven of respect and inclusion. If tonight has shaken that trust, I will personally ensure it is rebuilt." A pause, and then unexpectedly applause erupted. It wasn't unanimous, but it was enough to fill the lobby with a ringing affirmation. Some guests stood, clapping firmly. Others nodded in admiration, their faces lit with approval. Even a few staff members behind the bar joined in, their expressions filled with pride. Camille didn't smile, not outwardly, but inside, a flicker of satisfaction burned. This wasn't about humiliating a single employee. It was about reaffirming her values, reminding everyone, including herself, why Harris Lux existed in the first place. Later that night, as she finally stepped into the penthouse suite, her suite, Camille allowed herself to exhale. She slipped out of her blazer, set her worn carry-on on the bench at the foot of the bed, and walked slowly to the floor-to-ceiling windows. Below, Charleston glimmered in the night, the city alive with the hum of life. She thought about the young clerk, about how quickly he had decided who she was and who she wasn't. He had reduced her in seconds to a caricature in his mind, someone unworthy, someone to dismiss. But his mistake had been more than personal insult. It had been a breach of everything she had fought to create. She thought, too, of the countless others who faced those same dismissals daily. People without the platform or power she carried. People whose pain wouldn't be vindicated by applause in a lobby, or whose dignity wouldn't be restored by a single revelation. For Camille, this night wasn't just a personal victory. It was a reminder of the fight she carried into every boardroom, every contract negotiation, every expansion plan. Her hotels were more than places to sleep. They were symbols of possibility, proof that luxury could belong to everyone, that excellence knew no color, and that dignity was not negotiable. She poured herself a glass of water from the suite's minibar, the sound of the liquid filling the crystal glass, steadying her thoughts. Then, setting it aside, she whispered to herself, "Never again," and she meant it. If anyone ever doubted her place, if anyone ever questioned whether she belonged, they would learn, as that clerk had learned, that underestimating Camille Harris was a mistake they would regret within minutes.